Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I worked two part-time jobs through my first year just to cover tuition and basic expenses. By my second year, things got a little easier. I found a decent campus job at the library that paid well enough that I could drop one of my other jobs. I had a girlfriend I really cared about, and we'd been together for about 8 months. Life wasn't fancy, but I was happy. Karen came into our lives then. My girlfriend introduced us at a campus coffee shop one afternoon. Karen was her roommate from freshman year, and they'd stayed close even after living separately. Karen gushed about finally meeting the famous boyfriend she'd heard so much about. I told her it was nice to meet her too, since my girlfriend talked about her all the time. Then Karen made a comment about loving my vintage phone, calling it very retro. I looked down at my 3-year-old phone. It worked fine, so I'd never seen a reason to upgrade. But the way she said vintage made it sound like I was carrying around a brick from the Stone Age. Over the next few weeks, Karen kept making little comments. When I picked up my girlfriend in my old Honda, Karen would joke about how the car was built before Wi-Fi existed. When we went out and I wore my usual jeans and t-shirt, she'd make comments about how relaxed my style was. Each comment came with a laugh, like it was all friendly, teasing, but there was always this edge to it. The real problems started when money got involved. We were all hanging out at a campus coffee shop one evening. The bill came to about $25 for the three of us. Without thinking much about it, I grabbed the check and paid. It wasn't a big gesture, just something I did when I had a little extra cash. Karen thanked me and called me so generous. My girlfriend said I didn't have to do that, but I told her it was no big deal and my treat. After that night, something changed. Every time we went out, Karen would conveniently forget her wallet, or suddenly remember she was a little short that week. She'd give my girlfriend these looks and small nudges, like there was some inside joke I wasn't getting, and somehow I always ended up covering her part. At first, I didn't mind. I figured everyone goes through tight spots with money, but it kept happening. Coffee runs, fast food trips, even when we went to see a movie. Karen always had an excuse, and I always ended up paying. The situation got worse when my girlfriend mentioned that Karen and some other friends were planning a weekend trip to a beach town about 3 hours away. My girlfriend told me about Karen organizing this trip for the following weekend. She said it would cost about $300 per person for the hotel and activities. I explained that it sounded fun, but I couldn't swing $300 right now because I was trying to save money for next semester's books. My girlfriend said she understood. A few days later, my girlfriend brought it up again. She told me that Karen had been saying some things about the trip. When I asked what kind of things, my girlfriend explained that Karen said I was being cheap. She said Karen believed that if I really wanted to come, I'd find a way to make it work. That hit me hard. I've been working 25 hours a week on top of classes just to keep my head above water. Every dollar I earned went toward rent, food, or school expenses. I wasn't being cheap, I was being responsible. I asked my girlfriend if she'd told Karen about my situation, about how I was paying for everything myself. She said Karen knew but said I could ask my parents or pick up extra shifts. I didn't say anything else, but I was frustrated. Karen had no idea what my life was like. She didn't know about the nights I'd stayed up late doing homework after working an 8-hour shift, or how I sometimes ate ramen for 3 days straight to make sure I had enough money for gas. They went on their trip without me, which was fine. I spent the weekend working extra hours and actually enjoyed having some quiet time to myself. What happened next really opened my eyes. When they got back, my girlfriend told me something interesting. She said the weirdest thing had happened on the trip. Karen had run out of money on the first day. When I asked what she meant, my girlfriend explained that Karen said she'd miscalculated and couldn't afford her share of anything. My girlfriend ended up paying for all of Karen's meals and activities. I was quiet for a moment, processing this information. I pointed out that this was the same Karen who called me cheap for not being able to afford the trip. My girlfriend agreed and said it had been awkward. Karen kept promising she'd pay her back, but she spent the whole weekend posting about all the stuff they did. I remembered something. Just a month before the trip, Karen had been showing off a huge shopping haul from expensive stores. She'd bought a $200 jacket and a bunch of makeup that probably cost another $100. She'd posted everything on social media, talking about treating herself. So she had money for fancy clothes and luxury makeup, but not for her own food on a trip she organized. And somehow I was the cheap one for not being able to drop $300 on a whim. That night I made a decision. I was done subsidizing Karen's lifestyle. I downloaded the money tracking app called Fizz and started logging every expense. If we went out, I'd pay for exactly what I ordered and nothing more. When Karen would forget her wallet or claim to be short on cash, I'd politely decline to help. The first time I did this, Karen looked shocked. She told me she'd forgotten her purse in her dorm and asked if I could spot her for coffee, promising she'd totally pay me back. I told her no worries. She could grab something next time when she had her wallet. Karen asked if I was serious. I explained that I was trying to stick to a strict budget right now. I ordered my coffee and sat down. Karen stood there for a moment, probably expecting my girlfriend to offer to pay instead. But my girlfriend was dealing with her own money issues after covering Karen's expenses on their trip. Karen announced that she guessed she'd just go without. She made a big show of sitting down and sighing loudly, but I didn't budge. This became my new normal. Every time we went out, I'd pay for exactly what I ordered. When Karen would make comments about being hungry or thirsty, hoping someone would offer to buy her something, I'd just nod but keep my wallet closed. The change was immediate and obvious. For the first time since I'd known her, Karen started actually paying for her own things. She'd grumble about it, but she'd pull out her own money. My girlfriend noticed too. She told me it was weird seeing Karen actually buy her own coffee. She said she didn't think she'd ever seen Karen pay for anything when I was around. I just said that was interesting. I didn't explain my strategy, but I could tell my girlfriend was starting to see the pattern too. Karen had gotten comfortable expecting other people to cover her expenses, and now that the free ride was over, she didn't like it. Watching Karen try to guilt me back into paying for her stuff was something else. She'd make comments about how things were so expensive or how she was saving money for important things. But I'd learned that her version of important things usually involved shopping trips and luxury items she'd post about online. One day, we were at a restaurant and Karen ordered an expensive meal, probably assuming I'd help cover it like I used to. When the check came, I put down exact change for my sandwich and drink. Karen complained that the total was a lot higher than she'd expected. My girlfriend asked how much she had. Karen said she had maybe half of what she owed. There was this moment of silence where everyone waited to see what would happen. In the old days, I would have automatically covered the difference, but not anymore. I suggested that the server probably knew how to split the check, if that would help. Karen said never mind, she'd figure it out. She ended up calling someone to bring her money, and we sat there awkwardly for 20 minutes while she waited. But I didn't feel bad about it. She'd ordered the food knowing she couldn't afford it, probably banking on someone else bailing her out. Once I stopped giving Karen access to my money, she started treating me differently. The snarky comments about my phone and car mostly stopped. She couldn't really mock my financial situation while simultaneously expecting me to pay for her stuff. My girlfriend and I are still together, and she's started to see Karen's behavior more clearly. She doesn't invite Karen to hang out with us as much, and when she does, Karen actually brings her own money now. I'm 18 and from Ontario. I saved up for months to visit my cousin in Florida. She's 19 and we've been close our whole lives. My parents thought it would be good for me to experience life outside Canada before university, so they helped me plan this 2-week trip. My cousin lives with her family in Tampa. Her parents were always nice when we video called. She constantly posted about how excited she was for my visit. I've been looking forward to this trip for over a year. It was my first time traveling alone. The first few days went well. We went to the beach, went shopping, and caught up on everything since we last saw each other at our grandmother's funeral 2 years ago. Then things got weird. On my 4th day there, we planned to meet her boyfriend at an outdoor restaurant downtown. My cousin had spent the morning doing yard work with her dad. When we got ready to leave, she was sweaty and smelled bad. I suggested she might want to shower first, since we were meeting her boyfriend. She laughed it off and said she didn't have time. She sprayed some body spray on herself instead. We got to the restaurant around noon when it was really hot. Even sitting in the shade, it was sweltering. My cousin wore a tight black shirt that showed every sweat stain. She smelled pretty bad, but I wasn't going to say anything. Her boyfriend showed up about 10 minutes later. He's a clean-cut guy who always looks perfect. He walked over to our table, gave my cousin a quick kiss, and she introduced us. He seemed nice and said he'd heard a lot about me. We sat down at the picnic table. Something was off. The boyfriend kept making faces like he was trying not to react to something. At first, I thought maybe he was just uncomfortable in the heat. Then my cousin leaned over toward her boyfriend. She thought I was looking at the menu, but I heard every word. She whispered to him that the smell was coming from me and asked him not to say anything. I looked up from my menu right away. I told her the smell was not from me. The whole table went quiet. My cousin's face turned red and her boyfriend looked confused. He leaned closer to my cousin and took a sniff near her shoulder. He told her the smell was actually coming from her. Then he said something about how it was humanizing when a beautiful woman gets smelly, and that it made her more real. He kissed the top of her head. My cousin let out this awkward laugh. I felt bad for her, but I was also angry that she tried to blame me. The rest of lunch was uncomfortable. My cousin barely spoke. Her boyfriend kept trying to make small talk with me, and I wanted to leave. When the food came, I ate fast so we could go. The ride back was worse. My cousin didn't say anything until we pulled into her driveway. Then she turned to me and said she couldn't believe I had embarrassed her like that in front of her boyfriend. I told her she was the one who embarrassed me by trying to blame her body odor on me. She said I didn't have to call her out like that and that I broke the girl code. She said girls were supposed to support each other, not throw each other under the bus. I stared at her. This was the same person who had just thrown me under the bus an hour earlier. I asked her about not lying about your cousin to make yourself look better. She said I was being dramatic and that she was just trying to save face. I asked her how making me look bad was okay. She said I could have just played along and now her boyfriend thinks she's gross. I pointed out that he said it was humanizing and kissed her afterwards. He didn't seem bothered until she made it weird. She got out of the car and slammed the door. I sat there trying to process what had happened. That evening her parents asked how lunch went. Before I could answer, my cousin jumped in with her version. She said I had embarrassed her in front of her boyfriend and that I was being difficult. Her parents looked at me with disappointment. Then her boyfriend showed up for dinner. We were all sitting around the table when her dad made a joke about young people and hygiene. Her boyfriend laughed and said he should probably shower before they hang out tomorrow because he didn't want to end up like today when someone might blame their smell on someone else. He winked at me. My cousin's parents looked confused, so her boyfriend explained what actually happened at lunch. He said my cousin had tried to blame me for her body odor and I had just defended myself. My cousin's face went pale. Her parents turned to her with raised eyebrows. Her mom said trying to blame her smell on her guest was incredibly rude. Her dad said they had raised her better than that. My cousin tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. Her boyfriend had witnessed everything and backed up my version. For the rest of my visit, her parents made sure she apologized and treated me with respect. My husband and I host family gatherings at our house. We moved here because it's accessible for him since he's been in a wheelchair after a car accident 5 years ago. We had the house modified with ramps and wider doorways. The front entrance has a wooden ramp that leads into our living room so he can get around easily. My husband comes from a big family who love getting together for birthdays, holidays, or weekend barbecues. Our house became the usual spot because we have a large living room and a decent backyard. Everyone knows we're laid back about most things. My husband's cousin had been spoiled growing up. His parents never taught him the word no. When he became an adult, he seemed better. He had a job, his own apartment, and appeared to be doing well. But 3 weeks before this happened, he bought his first motorcycle. He was obsessed with this shiny black bike. The trouble started when we invited everyone over for my mother-in-law's birthday. About 15 family members showed up. Everything was going well until my husband's cousin arrived. Instead of parking in our driveway like everyone else, he rode his motorcycle right up to our front door and started looking at the ramp. The cousin asked if he could bring his bike inside because it might rain. I said no and told him he could park it next to the other cars in the driveway. He kept insisting, saying it might get wet and pointing out that we had a perfect ramp. My husband wheeled over to see what was happening. He told his cousin that the ramp was for his wheelchair, not for vehicles. The cousin kept pushing, saying it was just for a few hours and that the bike wasn't heavy. I told him absolutely not because our living room wasn't a garage. The cousin got that look I remembered from when he was a kid and didn't get his way. His jaw tightened and his eyes got stubborn. He complained that we were being ridiculous and reminded us we were family. He said he wasn't asking to move in. My husband told him we were being reasonable and pointed out there was plenty of space in the driveway. I thought the cousin was going to give up. He walked back toward his bike and we started heading inside. But then he turned around and began pushing the motorcycle toward the ramp anyway. I shouted at him, asking what he was doing. He said he was bringing it inside and that we'd get over it. My husband quickly positioned his wheelchair at the bottom of the ramp, blocking the way. He told him no. Things got ugly. The cousin started yelling about how we were being selfish and how the bike was expensive. He said he couldn't risk it getting stolen or damaged. He demanded that my husband move out of his way. My husband told him to park it in the driveway or leave. The cousin called the situation ridiculous and started ranting about it being just a stupid ramp. I got angry and told him that ramp was how my husband got in and out of his own house. The shouting attracted attention from inside. My mother-in-law and a few other relatives came to the door to ask what was going on. The cousin complained that we wouldn't let him park his bike inside. One of the uncles asked why he would want to park it inside. The cousin just said because he said so. It was like watching a grown man throw a toddler tantrum. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folding knife. He repeated his demand for my husband to move, this time while holding the weapon. The whole family went silent. My mother-in-law gasped, and everyone took a step back. My husband didn't budge from his position on the ramp. He told the cousin to put the knife away and get off our property. I told him he needed to leave. The cousin said he wasn't going anywhere until he got what he wanted. He was waving the knife around, not directly threatening anyone, but making it clear he had it. My heart was pounding, but I was also furious. This was our home and he was ruining a family celebration over a motorcycle. I told him he wasn't welcome here anymore. I ordered him to get out. The cousin protested that we couldn't kick him out because we were family. My husband said that family doesn't threaten family with weapons. The cousin completely lost it. He started screaming about how we were all against him and how nobody appreciated him. Then he stormed into our house still holding the knife. I followed him inside, terrified of what he might do. He went straight to our entertainment center and swept everything off the top shelf. Our wedding photos, some decorative vases, and my husband's trophy from a wheelchair basketball tournament all crashed to the floor. He yelled that if we wanted to treat him like garbage, fine. He kicked over a plant stand and knocked some books off our coffee table. The other family members were backing away, some heading for the door. I screamed at him to stop. I told him he was destroying our house. He said good, maybe now we'd listen to him. My husband had wheeled inside and was reaching for his phone. He said he was calling the police. The cousin told him to go ahead and see if he cared. When my husband actually started dialing, the cousin's attitude changed. He realized this wasn't just family drama anymore. The cousin told us to wait and said we didn't need to call the police because we could work it out. My husband explained that he had threatened us with a knife and trashed our house, so we were way past working it out. The police arrived in about 5 minutes. 2 officers came to the door and I quickly explained what happened. They could see the mess in our living room and the motorcycle still sitting by our front ramp. One of the officers asked where the cousin was. I told them he was in the living room. When the officers walked in, the cousin was sitting on our couch like nothing had happened. He still had the knife in his hand. The first officer told him to show his hands and place any weapons on the ground. The cousin asked what weapons and said it was just a pocket knife. The second officer ordered him to place it on the ground. The cousin called the situation stupid and said we were overreacting. The first officer repeated his command to place the knife on the ground and put his hands behind his back. Instead of complying, the cousin stood up and started arguing with the officers. He said this was all a misunderstanding and that we were his family and he wasn't really threatening anyone. The second officer gave him one last warning to drop the weapon. The cousin insisted it wasn't a weapon but just a tool. That was his mistake. The officers didn't wait any longer. They moved in and took him down, handcuffed him, and took the knife. He kept yelling about police brutality and how this was unfair when they led him out to their patrol car. The whole family watched from our front yard when he was arrested. His motorcycle was still sitting by our ramp. One of the officers asked if we wanted to press charges. My husband said absolutely. I added that the cousin had threatened us in our own home and destroyed our property. The officer nodded and handed us some paperwork. We found out later that the cousin was charged with assault, criminal threats, and vandalism. He spent the night in jail and had to pay a fine plus money back for the items he broke. His parents called us the next day, apologizing and asking if we'd drop the charges. We told them that actions have results, and maybe this would teach their son some respect. His motorcycle got towed from our property while he was in jail because it was illegally parked on our lawn. He had to pay impound fees on top of everything else. I fix machines for a living and have been doing it for about 15 years. I started at this manufacturing plant 10 years ago, after working different jobs at the same company. Before this, I worked in shipping during the day and did maintenance at their other facility. The company treated people well with good benefits and steady work. When the night maintenance job opened up, I took it. My job was simple. I worked alone on the night shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. When something broke, they paged me, and I fixed it. The night shift paid more money, and most nights were quiet. I could read, watch TV, or relax until something needed fixing. Machines don't follow schedules. A conveyor belt jams when it wants to jam. A pump leaks when it decides to leak. So I worked flexible hours that made sense for everyone. If everything ran smooth, I ate lunch whenever I wanted. If something broke during lunch, I fixed it right away. Most nights, I clocked out for lunch about an hour before my shift ended, around 6 a.m. I ate in the break room, sometimes took a short nap, then clocked back in to finish the shift. Sometimes I reheated my food 3 or 4 times, because I kept getting called to fix things. That was just part of the job. The production supervisors liked having me around because they knew I would drop everything to get their lines running again. Every minute a line stays down costs the company hundreds of dollars. I took pride in keeping things moving. Then we got a new plant manager. This guy came from corporate with a clipboard full of new rules he wanted everyone to follow. He spent weeks walking around during day shift, taking notes and changing things nobody asked him to change. One Tuesday morning, 20 minutes before my shift ended, I was eating lunch when my pager went off. The packaging line was down with some sensor problem that would take maybe 5 minutes to fix. I grabbed my tools and went over there. It was just a dirty sensor. I cleaned it, tested everything, and had them running again in less than 10 minutes. The supervisor thanked me and I went back to finish eating. The next day, I got called into the office. The manager told me he needed to talk about yesterday's lunch break. I asked what about it. He said I was supposed to be off the clock but I was working, which he claimed broke labor laws. I asked if he wanted me to let the line stay down until I clocked back in. He said I had to take a full 30-minute lunch break off the clock at the same time every night with no exceptions. He made it clear I could not work when off the clock. I stared at him trying to understand what he just said. I asked if he wanted me to ignore breakdowns during lunch. He said I would take lunch from midnight to 12:30 a.m. every night and could not work during that time. I asked what happens if there's an emergency. He said someone from day shift would have to come in. This made no sense. The whole point of having a night guy was for exactly these situations. I mentioned that years ago when I worked a different job at this company, there was a truck stop down the road with great steak and eggs. Maybe they still had good food. He quickly said I couldn't leave the property during my shift. That's when I got mad. I told him to hold on. He wanted me over the clock for 30 minutes every night at midnight sharp, but I couldn't leave the property. He said that was correct. I laid it out for him. First, if I'm off the clock, he won't see me because I won't be here. Second, in 10 years working nights, I never had a scheduled lunchtime because things break when they break, not when it's convenient for his schedule. Third, he needed to pick the 30 minutes during the night when absolutely nothing gets fixed because I'll be off the clock and gone. His face turned red. He said I couldn't leave the premises during my shift. I told him if I'm off the clock, I'm not on shift. He needed to decide either I'm working and available to fix things, or I'm on my own time and can go wherever I want. He couldn't have both. He started yelling about company policy. I told him to change the policy or find someone else to work nights. I said I wouldn't sit in a break room for 30 minutes every night while machines broke down just so he could follow some rule that made no sense. I walked out and went home. I thought I might get fired, but the job market was good and I had plenty of experience. Other companies always needed good maintenance people. The next night, the production supervisor pulled me aside. He asked what I said to the new manager because he'd been running around all day asking about downtime costs and emergency procedures. I said I just explained how things work here. He told me the manager had a meeting with the plant engineers that afternoon. They told him it would cost more to bring in day shift people for emergencies than to pay me overtime. Over the next few weeks, I waited for more trouble, but the manager never said another word about lunch schedules or being off the clock, and he started avoiding me completely. 2 years ago, my husband left me when I was pregnant with my third child. He decided he didn't want to be a father anymore and moved across the country. So there I was, dealing with a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a baby on the way, all by myself. The apartment we were living in was too expensive for just my income, even with child support when he actually bothered to send it. I work at a medical clinic, and while it pays okay, it's not enough to cover a 2-bedroom apartment in a nice area plus daycare for 3 kids. I spent months looking for somewhere cheaper that wasn't in a terrible neighborhood. I found this apartment complex that was having some kind of special deal for new residents. The rent was reasonable, and it seemed like a decent place. The property manager mentioned that it was mostly young professionals without kids, but she said families were welcome. I figured that was perfect. Quiet neighbors during the day while I'm at work, and maybe the kids could make some friends. Moving day was exhausting. Trying to pack up a whole apartment while keeping 3 little ones entertained and safe is basically impossible. My oldest tried to help, but mostly she just wanted to climb on all the boxes. The 2-year-old kept trying to help by unpacking things I'd already packed, and the baby needed to be fed every 2 hours. I barely slept the first night. Not because of the kids, they were so tired from all the excitement that they crashed early. I was just lying there thinking about how this was our fresh start. The next morning I was rushing around trying to get everyone ready. I had to be at work by 8 in the morning, which meant getting all 3 kids to the babysitter's house by 7:30 in the morning. The babysitter is this sweet older lady who watches them at her place, and she always comes out to help me get them from the car to her door because juggling 3 car seats and diaper bags is like trying to solve a puzzle while running a marathon. I was carrying the newborn in his car seat, holding the 2-year-old's hand, and trying to make sure the 3-year-old didn't run into the parking lot when my neighbor came out of the apartment next to mine. I'd seen her briefly the day before when the movers were there, but we hadn't talked. She looked me up and down with this expression like she'd just stepped in something gross. She asked me what unit I was even from while rolling her eyes, like I was some kind of intruder. I told her I lived in the apartment right next to hers and asked why she wanted to know. She told me I needed to go. She said she chose not to have kids so she wouldn't have to listen to that nonsense. I just stared at her for a second. I mean, what do you even say to that? I was trying to focus on getting the baby buckled into the car and not drop everything I was carrying. The 2-year-old was getting fussy because she was hungry, and the 3-year-old kept asking why the lady looked angry. But Karen wasn't done. She kept going. She told me she moved here specifically because it was quiet, and that she worked from home and needed pace. She said this building was perfect until yesterday. She went on about how she'd already talked to the property manager about noise complaints. She said people like me with screaming kids think we can just move anywhere and ruin it for everyone else. I was trying so hard to stay calm. I really was. I kept thinking about how I couldn't afford to get kicked out of here, how long it took me to find this place, how the kids needed stability, but then she said the thing that just pushed me over the edge. She called my children little brats and said she didn't sign up to listen to them all day. That was it. I straightened up from buckling the car seat and turned to face her. I told her they weren't brats, they were babies, and my oldest was literally only 3 years old. I explained that she lived in an apartment building where kids existed in the world, and sometimes they made noise, so she needed to deal with it. I pointed out that if my children ever disturbed her, I was sorry, but I was literally the only adult here with them 90% of the time. I asked her if there were 3 of me, because if not, then how exactly did she expect me to keep them all quiet all the time? I told her she was entitled to a child-free life, but she wasn't entitled to a child-free world, and she needed to get over it. Her mouth just dropped open. She wasn't expecting me to respond. She sputtered that I couldn't talk to her like that and threatened to call the landlord right away. I told her to go ahead because I had a signed lease just like she did. I finished getting the kids in the car and drove to the babysitter's house. I was shaking the whole way there, partly from anger and partly from worry. What if she really could get me kicked out somehow? When I got to work, I called the property manager during my lunch break. I explained what happened and asked if there were any noise restrictions I should know about. The manager, who seemed really nice, told me that normal living sounds, including children playing and crying, were completely allowed during reasonable hours. She said she'd already gotten a call from my neighbor, but that entitled neighbors complaining about kids wasn't grounds for eviction. The property manager also mentioned something interesting. Karen had been calling to complain about various neighbors for months. The people above her walked too loudly. The people across the hall cooked food that smelled weird. Someone's television was too loud even though it was barely audible in the hallway. She was basically the building's problem resident. That evening when I got home with the kids, I saw Karen in the parking lot again. She glared at me but didn't say anything. I just smiled and waved when I carried my children inside. About a week later, I was coming home from the grocery store when I saw Karen outside talking to another neighbor. When I walked past with my cart and the kids, I heard her complaining about me again. She was telling him how rude I was and how those kids were always screaming. She said this used to be such a nice, quiet building. The other neighbor, a guy in his 30s, just looked at her and said he didn't know what she was talking about. He told her he thought the kids were cute and he barely heard them anyway, but he mentioned that he could hear her complaining about them through the walls pretty much every day. Karen walked back inside. I gave the neighbor a grateful smile and he helped me carry my groceries upstairs. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.